Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our presentation today. This presentation is titled Speaking and Interaction Test for Japanese University Students, Development and Administration. My name is Natsumi Onaka from Iwate University, Japan.
Okay, and I'm Dan Newbury from Fuji University in Japan.
And I'm Jacob Petersen. I'm also at Iwate University, Japan.
Okay, first, I'd like to give you an overview of our research project. This project is supported by the Japanese government, and you can see the number of this research. In this chart, you can see the big picture of what we are trying to do. Now, here is an interlocutor. The teacher interviews the two test takers. Sometimes it will be interlocutor and test taker talking, interacting, or sometimes the test takers interact to each other in English. And all of this will be recorded and stored as a digital data. And this recording will be assessed by the third-person assessors. And these people are trained assessors, and their evaluation will be stored, and this will be sent to the teacher who will give the final grade to the students. And we are trying to develop this whole scheme. And there are 4 points we would like to emphasize. One is this: there is no paper-based things. LMS, everything will be managed by LMS and as data. And the second one is the appropriate topic and the level. Not only for verbal, but non-verbal communication ability will be assessed. We can do that because we videotape the whole scene. And next is formative evaluation. We will give the comment, and then later you will hear more about this. And the fourth, a training scheme of the interlocutors and assessors. Now, Dan and Jacob will explain more in details.
Thank you very much. So now I'll talk about the tasks, the constructs, and the calibration of the analytic scales. What are we trying to measure? And this statement gives an overview of what we are trying to measure. First, I want to give an explanation of the CEFRJ. The CEFRJ is based on the CEFR, and the CEFRJ provides can-do descriptors for English L2 learners and educators for measuring the ability on a scale that is more in line with Japanese people's English abilities. Japanese tend to have more limited English ability than, say, for example, people from countries in Europe. So the CEFRJ developers have added a pre-A1 level and subdivided the levels from A1 to B2 into sublevels, as well as adapted can-do descriptors to the Japanese context. As you will see, our constructs are partly based on CEFR ability levels, but we have also included findings from empirical research as well. I want to look at our mission statement with this test. So the CEFRJ A2 to B1 level speakers' ability to converse and interact in English with the interviewer and other students about everyday topics relevant to their lives. And so on the next slide, I will talk about the key words that helped us make the constructs and the tasks and the rating scale. So in the context of this test, conversation ability is represented by the speaker's linguistic range, vocabulary, and spoken fluency, which can be described in terms of the CEFR learner and speaker competencies as defined in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 of the CEFR. When defining interactional competence, the interactional competence construct, we didn't use the CEFR as much. As many researchers have pointed out, interaction is not very well defined in the CEFR, especially at the lower levels. So we are using findings from the work of researchers such as DeCoste and Brown, who have investigated what speaking assessment graders focus on. They incorporate nonverbal behaviors such as gaze, eye contact into the construct. We felt this would facilitate assessing the less verbally proficient test takers who don't have the verbal skills to engage in what may be more complex behaviors such as topic and turn development. And in the context of this test, everyday topics link to the CEFR defined domains, which there are 4 of. There's personal, public, occupational, and educational. And our test is mainly testing the use of language in the personal domain. So we want to see how test takers can interact in talking about everyday topics that are connected to their lives. Okay, next slide. The analytic scale that we are using has 3 constructs. It has the grammar and vocabulary. We have linked those together. And those are 1 criteria, fluency, and then interactional competence. And as far as the grammar and vocabulary construct, I will talk about the rubric a little bit and how the rubric measures the test taker's ability in the grammar and vocabulary construct. Primarily the grammar construct, grammar part of the grammar and vocabulary construct focuses on the complexity of the utterance and the cohesion of the utterance. If the student speaks in more full sentences and, for example, uses because, for example, I am going to Tokyo because I want to meet my friend, that is graded higher at a higher level than just I am going to Tokyo. So that's more complexity is graded higher. As far as vocabulary goes, we're grading how the students use verbs, if they have a wider range of verbs or if they can use the correct verbs in different situations, the depth of their noun and adjectives. So especially with the adjectives, can they explain themselves and make themselves understood at a deeper meaning level? And then the use of quantifiers such as many and much. Oftentimes, Japanese English speakers will have problems with using much and many. And so if they are able to use those correctly, or if they try to use them at all, they are graded at a higher point. Okay, as far as fluency goes, our fluency construct is rated with false starts, how many false starts are in the utterance, how often they hesitate, and that's what the hesitation is how often they must search for language inside of their interlanguage. And we especially put a lot of emphasis on burden on the listener. So if the listener must strain and struggle to listen to the test taker, to the person, then that will rate lower at a lower point scale. Last construct is interactional competence. And in the context of our test, how much the speaker uses nonverbal interaction, such as eye contact and gestures, and how much they attempt to close gaps between turns between themselves and their partner. And also the use of back channeling and rejoinders is rated within the interactional competence. Again, the CEFR does refer to interactional competence, but it's somewhat unclear between the levels. And so we've incorporated research from DeCoste and Brown and Waring into our construct. At the end, because I don't want to go too far into the rubric, that would take a long time, I have put a QR code at the end of the slide deck. So if you are interested in seeing the rubric as it is now, you can refer to that using the QR code at the end of this presentation. Now, as far as our tasks, the tasks that we use in this test, two requirements we thought were needed. The first one is familiarity of the content. And so what we have noticed in other widely used tests is that oftentimes the content refers to things such as house parties and sports that perhaps Japanese speakers cannot relate to. And so that perhaps introduces non-construct interference. So we wanted the test takers to be familiar with the content. There also needed to be enough output for measuring their language ability. And so what this means is we've used open tasks for all of our tasks and prompts. Now, this is an example of the tasks that we have for measuring the grammar and vocabulary and fluency constructs. We have different tasks that I will not show you today before time, but these are the three tasks that we do have to measure these two constructs. And as you can see, they are quite open. Tell me about yourself. You can talk about your family, friends, or your hometown. It's very open. It's also probably very familiar to the student. University life, tell me about your university life. And university friends, tell me about your university friends. And so please kind of keep these tasks in your memory, because we will refer back to those as we continue along through the presentation. Okay, from now, I'm going to provide a status report of where we are in the progress of making this test. And that's what the data that you will see from now is based on. We have conducted about 9 interviews, so we have about 18 interviews on film, but each interview has 2 test takers. There have been 3 assessors active in grading these their performances, the test takers' performances. One of the assessors, myself, has not assessed all the interviews. There are a total of 5 tasks. Again, we will look at data on 3 of those tasks that are related to the grammar, vocabulary, and fluency constructs that we are measuring. And the analytic scale or rubric that we are using is a 3-point scale, with 3 being the highest score. I will provide some measurement information and talk about some possible interpretations of that information. First, we've got some summary statistics here. As you can see here, the first 2 tasks are generally the same in terms of the scores and the standard deviation found in their scores. And what we can see in the last task listed is that the score is about the same, but the standard deviation is a little bit higher than the first 2, meaning that the scores for that task had a little bit more variability in them. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So in this slide, we are using multifacets rash measurement to identify some relationships between the facets of the test. And if you don't know what a facet is, a facet is something that may affect the test outcomes. We have 4 facets in this test: the raters, the participants or test takers, the tasks, and the criteria. And so the benefit of using this tool is that it provides us with a singular scale for all facets that may affect speaker performances. And with it, we can understand how the elements within one facet relate to other elements within the same facet and elements in other facets. So, for example, over on here on the left, we can see, or in the raters facet, we can see that the teacher 3, TH3, is generally more lenient than teachers 1 and 2. So the TCH is teacher equals teacher. This could be an indication that either the teacher 3 or assessor 3 is grading too leniently, or that the other 2 assessors are grading too harshly relative to the others. And we will need to collect more data to verify this. Moving more to the right, you see the participants, P-A-R-T, participants. Over half of the participants are below the lowest rater and fairly low on the scale. This indicates that the test may be too difficult for most students, as indicated by their scores. So we will look at possibly making tasks that are a little bit easier for the students to speak in and produce output. Moving more to the right, looking at the tasks, we can see that University Friends is not grouped with the other 2 tasks. And if you'll remember back to the prior slide, we also saw that the standard deviation was higher for that particular task. While we thought that the tasks were generally the same in difficulty, it seems that perhaps this task, tell me about your university friends, may be more difficult than the other 2. 2 of the researchers pointed out that it's possible that the students have not had university friends long enough to talk about them, or that they may lack the vocabulary needed to talk about people, especially compared to talking about their routine life, as you can see in the university life. This was somewhat surprising to me, and we'll need to confirm that the tasks are in fact the same difficulty before we continue, because we are rating the students expecting that the difficulty is the same. So we'll be looking into that further as we gather more data. Also, we can see over here, going more to the right, the criteria. Fluency is a little bit higher on the scale than grammar and vocabulary, but they are relatively in the same area. So the criteria are working pretty well from this. We'll look into that further using other methods using this multifacets rash measurement in the future. But if we look over here to the far right, the GV stands for grammar and vocabulary, and the FLUE stands for fluency. We can see that it's easier for students to get a 2 in grammar and vocabulary than in fluency, and the threshold for a 3 in fluency is lower than grammar and vocabulary. So we did notice anecdotally that there were a lot more 2s given in fluency. And so moving on from here, I'm going to look at a little bit kind of a more simple rating. This is a sample rater from our group. And here it shows that this rater used the 1-point category 54% of the time, and the 2-point category was used 18% of the time, and the 3-point category was used 28% of the time. So we can see that the 1-point category was used over half the time. And the way I'm interpreting this at this moment, with the help of the other researchers and some other teachers that are beginning to use the rubric, we are going to need to separate the 1-point scale actually we have a 3-point scale now. We're going to need to move that probably to at least a 4-point scale because the raters are finding it difficult to differentiate between kind of 1s and 2s. And so it looks like they're going to 1 mostly. So we are going to address that in the future. Talking about an early stages performance report, tasks that generally appear to be the same level of difficulty, maybe or not, as we saw between the university life and university friends task. We will probably need more points on the scale. We're looking now at putting a 4-point scale together. And we probably just in general need to collaborate more on how to differentiate the rubric. The rubric is still somewhat difficult to use. And this will feed into the assessor training that we are setting up for later this year and early next year. Okay, and I'm going to pass it over to Jacob now.
All right, thank you very much. Since Dan covered the first portions of the test, talking about, asking the students about their university life or their university friends, and we realized that the scores were a bit different for the assessors, we decided to start looking at other parts of the test as well. The other portions of the test that we do have, there's another task where the students are given an image or set of images per se, and they're asked to talk about with a partner, and it's very open-ended. They can do what they want, but we're kind of reassessing if certain tasks are more difficult than others. The one we've had the most success with is asking for like a scenario where there's a student looking at 3 different jobs, like maybe a supermarket, a flower shop, or a coffee shop, but they have different distances from home or the school, and they have different hourly wage. The students are able to talk about that quite well. They can say, well, if it was me in that situation, I'd want this or that. But we had some other ones, such as what sort of club should you join, or, Tim is looking to make new friends at the university. What should he do? And those didn't quite have the interactions that, to be able to give us a chance to test their interaction skills in a second language. So we're also thinking about revamping some of those questions. The other task we had that we want to readdress as well is similar to the image. In a way, it's actually a video. They have to watch a 10 to 20 second silent video that we've got we recorded a couple students making with us. And they're basically different situations. Like, for example, one student might spill a coffee, or another student might, steal an umbrella from a different student, kind of situation. And we want the students to talk about it with each other. In the first round, we had some okay results on that, but we did have some issues with students going down some random tangents that made it more difficult for them to use the language they actually knew how to use. And so they easily got themselves into a situation where they couldn't comfortably talk about a subject. And so it's hard for us to really assess their interaction skills when they were hitting the wall with their vocabulary. So then, as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Natsumi said that we have it all stored in one place, our test. And so we've had some good things and bad things about it. The nice thing is that it's a one place login for the assessors. They just log into Moodle, they go to the one course I've set up for them, and they just go through the different videos, watching the students, and they grade them on the fly. That's the nice thing about that. It's a 100% controlled by us. So we don't have to worry about, them having to log into some application that's not working right or whatnot. If there's any issues, we're able to handle it in-house. And also, the nice thing about using the LMS, even though it's not really designed in this way, we're able to use certain features. In a situation where we've tried the assignment feature, and we're also working on the quiz feature. So far, I think I like the quiz feature better. But basically the video is there and has the rubric underneath the video, so that the teacher or the person who is assessing them is able to just watch the video and give the scores and see all the criteria of the rubric without having to go to a different page or have a piece of paper next to them or anything like that. They can pause the video anytime they like. They can, it's easy for them to grade in one spot. Some of the negative things we kind of come into is that I've had to install extra plugins into our Moodle system, and they're working, but they don't quite work as we would like them to. And we're making us think that maybe it's a lot of work, but perhaps it might be good to look into design our own plugin. Another one is more set up on our side of things. For the assessors, it's super easy. But for us, we have to get all the videos and assignments all set up and working correctly before we hand it off to the assessor. So that's a little bit of extra work on our end. And it's a benefit that's online, but it is online only, right? So if you ever had any issues with internet connectivity, you can't do any assessing at that time. So in conclusion, the tasks that we've initially started with, they seemed very similar to us when we were designing the tasks, but then the students were unable to produce at the same levels using the different questions. So we need to go back and think about some of those questions and seeing how we can do that differently, because we want it to be fair. We don't want one student to have an easy question, the other one have a difficult question. But at the same time, we don't want students to have the exact same question, because it gives the second student a chance to think about their answer. So we have to kind of think about that. Another thing is that the scale development is ongoing. So we are continually improving, trying to make it more granular, but not too complicated. We want to be able to have a better assessment of what the students can and cannot do, but we don't want to make it super complicated where the assessors are scratching their heads trying to figure out how to score. We also, related to the tasks not being similar, but it's a little bit different vein, is that interactive tasks are being fine-tuned to be more useful for Japanese students to relate to. Some of our initial questions become a general question that we thought would work for anyone. But then as the Japanese students started answering them, we realized that they didn't really have some of those life experiences or ways of thinking about things. And so as we decided we should go back and look at our questions as well, so that our audience can successfully navigate the questions without having any issues with that. We don't want cultural barriers to prevent them from being able to speak about something. And finally, the rubric hosting in Moodle is very convenient for the assessors, but there's always room for improvement on that. And we're thinking about perhaps different ways of hosting it in Moodle. All right, and as mentioned before, here's a QR code for our rubric if you want to see what we're currently using. That being said, our rubric is going to be changing as we're going along, but yeah, feel free to check it out. And next is our list of references. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.